Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I hope you're doing very well today. I want to respond to a viewer question that I received from our dear friend Jack Clare. Now, I should let you know something very special about Jack Clare. And well, first of all, he left a really great question. He was asking about my interest in art. Was I interested in art? And I'll get to the question in a moment, but it was a great question by Jack Clare. He's a dear friend of mine, and he's a dear friend of ours because he is he's kind of active in terms of leaving comments. He is certainly active when it comes to the live streams. He was certainly there when I was first starting out with the live stream format here on YouTube. And as some of you may know, I have been tinkering around with the live stream format. And so lately I've been starting this film club, live stream film club, where I'll talk about a particular film, and that'll be the topic of discussion for that particular day. So that was the live stream film club. So as some of you may know, so Sunday, June 16th, 2019, 6 a.m. Tokyo time, we will be talking about the film Rebecca. Okay, Rebecca, Alfred Hitchcock film Rebecca. So that's Sunday, June 16th, 6 a.m. Tokyo time. So if you're interested, please feel free to join us at the live stream film club. But the reason why I bring it up now is I should let you know that it was indeed our friend Jack Clare who had initially recommended to me to talk about a film. You know, I had started the live streams just randomly and just talking basically about general topics. I didn't have any set course of discussion. I was just basically dictating or being dictated by the flow of the live stream discussion. So I wasn't necessarily having anything planned, but it was Jack who very kindly suggested to me that perhaps I could set a particular film for the live streams going forward, and thus the notion of the live stream film club, at least here on this channel, was born. So Jack Clare, thank you very much for providing the initial comment, the seed, if you will. And so thank you. And that was really wonderful because I think the format is working out quite nicely. So we talked about Good Morning, and then Picnic at Hanging Rock, and now we're going to talk about Rebecca, and the next 8.5, and then after that the Red Shoes. And so it's hopefully going to turn out to be a regular thing. And in any event, Jack, I really have you to thank for your great suggestion, and it was really nice. You know, this Jack and his suggestion is yet another example of how I really rely upon you and depend upon all of you for what I do here. And because I really feel like this isn't a one-way street for me. It's not just me talking, but it's also your response and your input and your comments and your suggestions. And so it becomes a kind of two-way street. So I really think that this channel is like a collaboration among all of us, and I just happen to be the person speaking in this video, but really it's I really have all of you to thank, because if it weren't for you, I don't think this video would be here. So and I really want to thank you, and I think part of that has been Jack's contribution. It's been fabulous. So Jack, thank you so much. Thank you. You are truly a wonderful person, and it's really been a pleasure knowing you, and it will continue to be a pleasure for me to know you going forward. So I hope to talk to you again very soon. Speaking of which, Jack, you left a comment about, you asked a question, and let me just take the opportunity very briefly to answer it now, which is, and I'm paraphrasing. So you asked me, am I interested in art or any kind of artists, like paintings or sculpture or design and the like? And that was a very good question. And I thought I'd answer it as broadly as possible. So not necessarily focusing on art or about painting or design or photography, but just talking more about the arts in general, let's put it that way. So what are my interests in the arts outside of film? I think that's what you're getting at. So speaking of, let's say, art, I am not an expert in art. I am, I would say, a very, very, very casual, beginner level admirer of art at best. My mother, my late mother, was she had an artist's spirit, as it were. And not only was she a kind of artist herself, but she was also an admirer of many artists, and in particular 20th century artists. And so some of that rubbed off on me. So she was an admirer, and I also became an admirer of the works by, for instance, Jasper Johns or Jackson Pollock or Marcel Duchamp or Francis Bacon, designers like Charles and Ray Eames or Isamu Noguchi, and Picasso. Her interests were quite vast, and so some of that rubbed off on me. And in particular, I was really taken by Francis Bacon, but some of that rubbed off on me. But I'm not the biggest expert in art per se, and so my interests in terms of the arts was more into literature and reading when I was growing up. Now, I wouldn't label myself as being a wildly voracious reader. I wasn't the biggest reader among my friends growing up. I know many other people that I was friends with when I was young. They were much more active readers than I, but still I would say I read my fair share growing up, and then into middle school and high school, and then into early adulthood. So some books that I really enjoy, again, I can't really mention everything, but just to give an example of works that I really enjoyed, I think now that I'm older, the Rabbit books by John Updike really sing to me in a very profound way. I think more so than when I first encountered them when I was much younger. So the Rabbit books are really, I think, very important to my life right now. Also, Hemingway was always there. He never left, and he's still continues to be a very important source of inspiration to me, as is Fitzgerald, of course. In terms of Japanese authors, I would say, generally speaking, I'm not the biggest fan, but I am a fan of Haruki Murakami. And I think I might have mentioned this before. I'm a great admirer of the film Mishima and Life in Four Chapters, but I am admittedly not as into the works of Mishima, the literary works of Mishima, although I must admit that I really admire greatly the work, the Sea of Fertility cycle of books that he wrote. So that would be Spring Snow, what are the English titles? Spring Snow, Runaway Horses, Temple of was it Temple of Dawn, and Decay of the Angel. So those are just stunning works, and also works outside of the Sea of Fertility tetralogy. The cycle of works is, I really admire the Temple of the Golden Pavilion, Kinkakuji, very much so. But most of his other works, I must admit, I find to be somewhat difficult for me, although I am working on it. I am trying to get a better grasp of those works. But yeah, so there's Mishima, and let's see. So what are some other works that I was into? Let's see. Naked Lunch is a work that was very important to me when I was younger, and I was blown away by how profound and how simple it was at the same time. And when I say simple, I don't mean that in a derogatory sense, but I mean that in terms of how situations and pieces of information are strung together in a way that seems so simple, and yet there is a through line, or is there? I'm not even sure, of thought and experimentation that creates this real sense of true masterful chaos, and that is the work Naked Lunch. And I to this day I revisit that work quite often, and so and I still don't get a lot of what's going on, but oh gosh, that is a profoundly important work to me. And maybe if I go back to when I was younger and when I was in middle school, high school, when I was a kid with my friends, we would try to read Stephen King books together. I remember I tried to read The Stand when I was in, I think, 4th grade or something, and I failed miserably because I couldn't get through it. But I was able to read it through much later, when I was maybe in high school or college. But when I was much younger, it was a challenge to me. But I read many of the short stories by Stephen King, which were fascinating. There are many that gosh, maybe I'm getting the titles wrong. I haven't read them in a long time, but there was a short story. Was there a short story by Stephen King called, was it Strawberry Spring? Am I getting that right? Please correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a short story, I think, called Strawberry Spring. There's also a short story that's called The Jaunt, which is, oh my gosh, that is that is a creepy one. And I hope I got the title right, The Jaunt. And also there is a work called, oh gosh, I forget. I really should try to go back and read the Stephen King works, but I think it's in the short story collection called Skeleton Crew. It's the one with the guy, and he's he's stranded on a deserted island, and it's just him and how he's trying to survive. And it's a really, that's a very effective story. I wish I could remember the title. Please forgive me for not remembering. It's been a long time. But yes, so Stephen King. Yeah, that was interesting. I haven't read all of his works, but I've read my share. And I've read the Dark Tower series very much. And I really enjoyed that series, except for the ones, maybe 6 and particularly 7. The Dark Tower was maybe slightly underwhelming, but still, I think, overall a very interesting read. I mean, I was there visiting New York at the time when the Dark Tower hardcover number 7, the Dark Tower hardcover book, had just been released. And so I remember being on my trip, and I got the book, and I was in my hotel, and I was reading it the nights when I was staying in my hotel. It was wonderful. What else? Harry Potter. I must admit that Harry Potter came maybe a little bit too late for me. So I wasn't necessarily on the Harry Potter bandwagon to begin with, but I soon hopped on the bandwagon, and I became a fan of the works of the Harry Potter books. I was there. I was living in New York at the time when the Deathly Hallows was released in hardcover, and I was there standing in line like everyone else at my nearest Barnes & Noble. So that was a really fun time. Yeah, and that was a great read. I really enjoyed that, Deathly Hallows. And what else? I guess I'm maybe poetry as well. I'm not the biggest poetry expert or scholar, but I have experienced maybe a fairly decent amount of poetry over the years. I'm still how should I put it? I would say that I'm much like, I don't know if you remember Picnic at Hanging Rock, but there's the character of Irma in Picnic at Hanging Rock. Early on in the film, she is, the film makes reference, maybe a bit obliquely, but it makes reference to the poet Felicia Hemans. And Irma, when she is on the rock and with the other girls, she says, what is it? She says, the boy stood on the burning deck whence all but he had fled, tra-la. I forget the rest. And so I feel a little bit like that about poetry, the way Irma feels. I can remember snippets, but I tend to forget the rest. But I do remember snippets, and some works that remain, perhaps, there are some rumors and hints there, but more or less it's literature for me. Although yes, when I was young, I was very much into Tennyson for whatever reason, and I remember the Lady of Shalott. For whatever reason, the Lady of Shalott was a poem that really got to me. And I remember, I remember why, because when I was young, I was really into Agatha Christie. And Agatha Christie wrote a book called The Mirror Cracked from Side to Side. And I always loved that title, The Mirror Cracked from Side to Side. And the word cracked was spelled C-R-A-K''D. And I thought that was I was so fascinated by this title, The Mirror Cracked from Side to Side. And in fact, as some of you may know, this is borrowed from the poem The Lady of Shalott. Right? Out flew the web and floated wide, the mirror cracked from side to side. The curses come upon me, cried the Lady of Shalott. And so I was so fascinated by this poem, The Lady of Shalott, and I remember reading it so many times when I was a kid. I didn't understand all of it, but I just loved the flow. For whatever reason, the flow really stood out to me. And to this day, I love Lancelot in that. And what was that? Right? When he's talking about Lancelot and he's looking upon the Lady of Shalott, right? And he says, he said, she has a lovely face. God in his mercy lend her grace, the Lady of Shalott. I always thought that was such a beautiful line. And the Lady of Shalott in Tennyson. That's really just fantastic. And I remember I was not working, but I was in high school, and it was in high school in my English class that I think my English teacher really encouraged me to fall in love with William Shakespeare's works. And so she was very encouraging. And such a great inspiration, and I really loved that class. And so I would read a lot of Shakespeare, and I remember that was a really key moment, actually, because it was around that time in my life that I was really into. I was reading as many Shakespeare plays as I could. I wasn't understanding it, most of what I was reading, of course, and it took me such a long time to get through, to read all the annotations, the notes, and even with the notes I was unable to grasp everything that was going on. But I remember it was around that time that I was I was really into Shakespeare because of my English class. And it was around that time, I don't know if you know, but do you know the film Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country? Right? Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. So this is the last film with the entire original crew of the Starship Enterprise, so Captain Kirk and Spock and Bones and Sulu. Although Sulu, actually, by this time, I take that back, he wasn't a part of the crew here. He was the captain of the USS Excelsior, but the majority of the crew was there, and so it was directed by Nicholas Meyer. And The Undiscovered Country is, of course, a reference to Hamlet. And there was a great scene, or there's a great character in that film called General Chang. Now, General Chang was played by the unforgettable Christopher Plummer, and great Klingon. What a great Klingon character General Chang was, because he was so knowledgeable about Shakespeare. And it wasn't General Chang who said it, but it was Chancellor Gorkon, who's played by David Warner. And he had the great line in Star Trek VI where he said, "You haven't experienced Shakespeare until you've read him in the original Klingon." I just thought that was such a great line when I was a kid. And I was saying, and I remember seeing that in the theater, and I heard that line, and I was beaming because I felt like I got the joke, so to speak. So it was really wonderful. But there was a lot of Shakespeare quotes and references in that film, The Undiscovered Country. But one of the great sequences was the battle. What was the name of the planet? Khitomer. This was the battle with the Enterprise and the Klingon bird of prey, which could fire torpedoes while cloaked, which was at the time a very dangerous technological innovation in the universe of Star Trek. And so that was a great battle sequence. And during that sequence, I'm sorry if I'm spoiling Star Trek VI, I apologize. If you're wary of that, please stop this video and watch Star Trek VI and then come back. Okay, so if you're still here, you don't mind me talking about Star Trek VI, but if you recall, the battle was between the bird of prey and the Enterprise, and also the Excelsior comes in, but it's basically the battle between these three ships. And the captain of the bird of prey was General Chang. And as the bird of prey is just relentlessly assaulting these ships, these Federation ships, with torpedo after torpedo, you have General Chang on the intercom spewing forth all these random Shakespeare quotes, saying, right, "Our revels now are ended," and boom, and "Once more unto the breach, dear friends," and he says in Klingon, "Tak ba tak beh," which I think is Klingon for to be or not to be. And just all these quotes from Shakespeare, and it's relentless. The torpedoes were relentless, and his Shakespeare quotes were relentless. And it was a wonderful scene, and I remember being so happy watching that scene because it was the perfect combination for me at that point in my life when I was in high school of my interest in Shakespeare at the time, and also my interest in cinema because I was watching Star Trek Six, and so it was a wonderful converging of these two interests, and it was a wonderful meld, if you will, of these two spheres, and I love that scene for many reasons, but that in particular is a profound moment in my young movie going life, which was the merging of cinema and literature in this really profoundly unique way. I mean, in the context of Star Trek and the Enterprise versus the Klingon bird of prey. Who'd have thunk it, right? So that was a great moment, and I just was so fascinated from I think that probably did so much to solidify not only my love of literature at the time, or Shakespeare plays, but also my love of cinema. Yes, I probably could say that was one of the key moments in my cinema loving life growing up, which was watching Star Trek Six and the realization that Shakespeare was playing this huge role in this world that was unfolding before my eyes, that on its surface seemed as foreign and as far away from Shakespeare as anything that you could think of. But really, in fact, not only does it show the universality and appeal of Shakespeare, but it also shows the universality and malleability, positively so, of the art form of cinema. And I thought that was wonderful. So why am I saying this? Well, it's because I think it was because of my love of Shakespeare at the time helped me to fall in love more with cinema. And so I'm just that's a very fond memory. And actually, I had never really thought about that until now. So Jack, I hope that answers your question. I'm sorry for the long-winded and bloated way that I've answered it, but I hope that goes toward answering the question that you posed. But if not, I really apologize. And again, I'm very sorry for just talking randomly like this. But anyway, Jack, my friend, I want to say thank you, and I hope you are well. And once again, I really want to thank you so much for your suggestions and support and kindness. And really, I think it would be difficult to do this channel if it weren't for people like you, Jack. So I really owe you a lot, and I hope that comes across in what I'm saying, because I really want you to know that. And I value our friendship. It's really a pleasure for me to be able to say that I can call you my friend. So anyway, I hope you're well, and the rest of you, I hope you're doing well as well. And until we meet again, please be happy and healthy, and please take good care of yourselves, and please watch a lot of great movies. Until we meet again, my friends. Cheers.